All right, well, welcome to our third and final installment of the MARY HYTKEN DUMONT University here at Baron Hirsch. And our topic is the wisdom of Mishlei, Proverbs, and Ben Sira. Who was Ben Sira? We have on your final page here, it mentions that, no, I'm sorry, I did mention somewhere that that it was written by his grandson, perhaps, but actually, but the original Ben Sira was around the time of the original Ben Sira was around the time of Shimon HaTzadik, Simon the righteous, who was the son of Yochanan Kohen Gadol and the high priest, and that's what we know about him. So presumably he had some sort of, he was, we can see that he was very rabbinic because a lot of his ideas were adopted by rabbis later on. We can see that he's honing very closely to Mishlei for Proverbs. He's definitely, the whole book is based on the idea of Mishlei, no question about that. And we saw that, yeah, he may have read some Greek works, but not necessarily Aristotle. And this week we want to look at his the same questions on family. Question on family, particularly marriage, husbands and wives. There are other comments about family in the book, brothers and sisters, but we'll focus on husbands and wives mostly. Just to review a little bit, we mentioned that the status that a Torah book has, namely that somehow it's impure. A whole complicated thing why that's true, but the point is, if you have a Torah scroll and you actually touch the scroll itself, your hands are impure. It's an ironic thing about it. It has to do with where they used to store the Torahs and the dead rats and all that. And then if you didn't say that, then people would keep the truma, their holy food in the ark. Then there'd be dead rats. So in any event, but if it's not a real holy book, then it does not defile the hands. So he says if it's a book of the heretics, it doesn't defile the hands. It doesn't have the same status as the Torah. What about the Tosefta? There's an early source, a little later than the Mishnah, sometimes concurrent with the Mishnah, from Tanaim, from the early rabbis before the Gemara. No, Tosefta. It's also a medieval work. Tosefta is a work from the time of the Mishnah, but maybe a little later. There was a book in the time of the Mishnah, but the book we have today, that we call is the original book that the Talmud refers to as something we don't know. In any event, they say Sifrei Ben Sira, the books of Ben Sira. Sorry, I have to open up the document here on everybody. The books of Ben Sira and any books that were written, in recent times, says the Mishnah in the 2nd, 3rd century, are not mitamis yadayim. They don't defile the hands. They don't have the status of a Torah or of the book of Isaiah or the book of Psalms or Proverbs. So the book of Ben Sira does not. Again, we had the opinion of Rabbi Akiva that it's a terrible thing to study these books. We had the opinion of Rav Yosef that anything that's good, Rav Yosef is an Amor, he's a Talmudic rabbi. He said whatever is good in Ben Sira is good, whatever is not good, we shouldn't learn. And we had the very fact the Talmud over and again, not a million times, but maybe 10 times, quotes Ben Sira. So we see even the Talmud viewed it as a useful thing. What we hadn't studied until now was the question I think Charlie kept asking, what's wrong with Ben Sira? If Ben Sira indeed has all these nice sayings, sounds more or less like Mishlei, talked about wisdom, he was even more frum than more traditional than Mishlei, if that's possible, because he talks about Torah as the ultimate wisdom, whereas Mishlei views everything as wisdom. Wisdom is wisdom. So what's wrong with him if he's so frum, such a pious man? We talked about friendship last week. There were a few statements we didn't like, but more or less he had nice things to say about friendship, some of which were picked up by the rabbis later on in the Mishnah and all that. So what's wrong? So we're about to quote from the Talmud. In the Talmud, they're going to quote Ben Sira, and this particular case, the question is, what Ben Sira are they quoting? The question of the addition of Ben Sira is a question. Again, what do we have today? We have all the fragments of Geniza, Cairo Geniza, a little bit from Masada, just to show that it's there, and then we have the Caragnaza, and then the little bit of Qumran from the Dead Sea Scrolls. So so we have from the around this first, second century, all the way up to the 10th century, we have Jews using Ben Sira, and that's in Hebrew. And although we didn't know until Solomon Schechter, we didn't know it was written in Hebrew, we know that it was written. It seems that the Greek version that they have, which was translated from Hebrew, is fine. And more or less it's the same. I didn't do an exact line-to-line comparison. But when the Talmud quotes Ben Sira, and we'll now discuss in Sanhedrin 100b, why the Talmud doesn't like the book of Ben Sira, why it's not considered a holy book, they are going to quote verses. The question is, why are they quoting it in ways that we can't identify which verse it is? Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. So it says a quote here from a book that I'll cite later, but he says here the rabbinic quotations that the book from that book are generally not literal. So when the rabbis quote Ben Sira in this passage we're about to quote, not really a quote directly from Ben Sira. It's the things that he said. Segal, one of the scholars, reasons that the rabbis quoted from memory. Maybe they were just quoting from memory. They didn't get it quite right. Interesting. According to layman, literalness was not required. You don't need it. It's not a real biblical book. You could misquote it. It's not a problem. The quotations were adapted to suit the later context because the book of Ben Sira was not a biblical book. Which theory should we follow? Were the quotations taken from a complete edition of Ben Sira without any additions? If there was another book, or did the rabbis quote from of an anthology, extracts? So anyway, we don't know exactly why it is that when the rabbis critique the book of the book of Ben Sira, why do they quote verses that are not? Why do they quote verses that are not extant in our book? So we're not sure. Well, but let's continue anyway. Yes. Yeah. I give this translation. Florilegium apparently means a collection of literary extracts or anthology. Okay. Yes. Moving along. Sanhedrin 100b. The Mishnah teaches that Rabbi Akiva says, and we learned this in our other classes, also one who reads the external literature, the apocryphal books, has no share in the world to come. Rabbi Akiva is very extreme. He believes that tonight we're going to violate a terrible thing by reading this book. It's terrible. Now, the question is, did they think it was just a waste of time, or did they think it was actually evil? But anyway, the rabbis will discuss. The sages taught in the Braita in reference to this reading of the book of the heretics. Rav Yosef says it's also prohibited to read the book of Ben Sira. Abaye said to Rav Yosef, what's the reason it's prohibited to read the book of Ben Sira? If we say it's prohibited due to the fact Ben Sira wrote in it, do not flay the skin of a fish from its ear, so that the skin does not go to ruin, but roasted on the fire, eat with 2 loaves of bread, and you believe it to be nonsense. And he says that's not a good reason. Right? No, it's what do you care? Let it say silly things. So it's silly. Who cares? If your difficulties from the literal meaning, that does not pose a difficulty. As in the Torah, God also wrote, you should not destroy its trees. In other words, if flaying the fish in this way causes you to lose less of the fish flesh, then it's not against the Torah. It's good advice, because we're told not to cut down trees, not to waste things from nature. So if you could eat a fish in a more efficient way, I want to know it. I'm a wise man. I want to not waste things. There's a good way to flay a fish. You could have a book that's Jewish that talks about how to flay a fish. What's the problem? So he says that's if you take it literally. Now, a little bit PG-13 here. If your difficulties from the homiletic interpretation as a euphemism, and Ben Sira is really teaching us proper conduct, which is fine, that a man should not engage in sexual intercourse in an atypical manner, namely from the wrong side, with his wife, as it causes her discomfort. Or that's what he says here, it causes her discomfort. That's an interpretation. Or maybe it's not proper, or it's not nice, it's not, there are many things, looking face to face, whatever the reason is. But our rabbis also taught that. So if you don't like you don't like this statement about the fish because you think it's silly, it's not silly. There's a use to it. You save more fish this way. If you view it as a metaphor is teaching us something about marital conduct, and that's why I mentioned it tonight, because we're talking about marriage. Okay, so the rabbis like that advice. So then what's the problem? Rather, perhaps it poses a difficulty, because, and we're reading from the Talmud right now, because it's written there, a daughter is for her father false treasure. Not the father loves having a daughter, it's great. And then he realizes it's a false treasure. Why? Due to fear for her, he will not sleep at night. He'll never be able to sleep when he has a daughter. During her minority, lest she be seduced. He's afraid, he's protecting her. She's vulnerable. During her young womanhood, lest she gaze in licentiousness. She's sleeping around. And once she has reached majority, lest she not marry. He's afraid, oh, you should get married. Once she marries, lest she have no children. Oh, she's not having any children. Once she grows old, lest she engage in witchcraft. That's a rabbinic idea. That's an ancient idea that women are wearing. It's probably a rabbinic. It's probably an ancient fact that a lot of women were engaged in witchcraft. Yeah. So perhaps she would engage. Well, it could. Sorry. Yeah. Well, I don't know how many were actually put to death for it, but right, the theory. But it could be that they were doing witchcraft in order to have more children. They get older and they don't have any more children, so the husband doesn't want them anymore. So they say, oh, they do witchcraft to try to stay fertile later, or something like that, or to have grandchildren, or whatever it is. So we're afraid of that. So now this acts of something more cynical. Again, not a great expert in stoicism or cynicism, but maybe there's something cynical here. Maybe like the book of Ecclesiastes, which has been accused of being, kind of cynical. So there we could see that. However, he says, the Talmud says, all right, it's cynical, but didn't the sages say the same thing? They said it's possible for the world to exist without males, without females. You need men, you need women. Everybody has to do their share. Some of us have men, have boys. Some of us have girls. Some have only girls. Some have half and half. But you got to do your job. So nevertheless, happy is one whose children are males, and woe isn't him whose children are females. So again, not a politically correct statement, but yes, the Talmud says things like this, that, it's nice to have boys. Again, we all look at this and we're appalled and everything. And yet we know that they're still killing babies in China, and people call they make their girls into boys because they really want to have a boy. We want to have a boy. So these things are human nature. It's not, that's just an ancient problem. So, some of the, right. Anyway, I won't get beyond my area of expertise, but nonetheless, so that can't be the problem. Although these are very cynical kind of statements about girls, but not quite that. But they also agree that it's nice to have boys. They do more mitzvos. They could learn Torah more. So that's not the problem. Now, what do we have in Ben Sira regarding this? So I have a section that I don't have in translation, but he says as follows. He says, "Bat la'av matmenet sheker." Yeah. So it's similar. Listen to the translation. I'm going to translate and tell me if it sounds like what the Talmud quoted. This is what we have in our text. A daughter to her father, is a false treasure. Worry will disturb his sleep. In her young age, maybe she will. Not sure exactly the translation. And as she gets a little older, maybe she won't get married. She gets married, maybe she'll be seduced. In the house of Uve's Baal Lotistesh, we hope that she won't be licentious in her husband's home, etc., etc. So that we have a similar passage. In this case, we have a similar passage in our Ben Sira edition. Moving along. Rather, perhaps the book poses a difficulty because it's written there, do not introduce anxiety into your heart, as anxiety has killed many men. This we have in Ben Sira 14:1 and 13:29. Didn't Solomon? So what is he saying? Don't have anxiety. You don't need anxiety. Anxiety will kill you, right? We have doctors in our class here, right? Blood pressure and all that. So it's not good. So he says, Solomon said the same thing. Anxiety in the man's heart dejects him. And Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi interpret this verse in different ways. One says, if you have anxiety, you remove it from your mind. You should just put it out of your mind. It's a very non-psychological view that if you have anxiety, just stop thinking about it, right? Right? The elephant, stop, don't think about the elephant. And one says, you shall tell it to others. This is a very psychologically sound kind of a interpretation, if I may give it approval, that it's saying you have anxiety, talk to someone about it, make you feel better. So this is very psychological. This is very similar to modern psychology and therapy and all that. So, but we have such a statement that if you have if you have anxiety, you've got to get rid of it somehow. So that can't be the problem. So we have a statement here, just a little in interpolation here. There was a book called The Texts and Versions of Book of Ben Sira, and there he says as follows. Indeed, some of the material from the quotation does occur in somewhat similar context in Ben Sira. Do not give yourself over to grief, for the grief has killed many, whose heart has not brought grief upon him. So again, some of these statements that Talmud quotes are found in our Ben Sira, some are not. Okay, moving along. So we still haven't figured out why does Rabbi Akiva hate the book of Ben Sira? Rather, perhaps the book poses difficulties because it's written, prevent the multitudes from inside your house. Don't allow a lot of people in your house. And do not bring everyone into your house. Ben Sira 11:37, we have this text. But didn't Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi also say it? It's taught in the Braita. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says, a person should never have many friends inside his house. As is stated, there are friends that one has to his own detriment. So it's as his association with them will become weak and he'll be ruined. In other words, everyone agrees that you shouldn't have too many people over the house. Financially impossible. So that's not the problem either. So what are we saying? Over and again, we're saying the rabbis say the same thing as Ben Sira. So this is really thumbs up for the book of Ben Sira so far, because everything that we've said so far that we even thought would be problematic, actually the rabbi said something similar, even quoting from Mishlei itself, that says the same thing. Rather, right, very good. Joe, I'm just going to repeat that point. Dr. Joe Levy makes a good point. That what do you mean that this is a good statement because the rabbi said it? Maybe the rabbis got it from Ben Sira. So you say, oh, that's ridiculous. What do you mean? We already showed that the expressions, several expressions in Turkey Avos are borrowed, they're exactly the same as Ben Sira. So, and why shouldn't he be? He was Jewish and he doesn't seem to be anti-rabbinic. He liked Shimon HaTzadik. So he lived a couple hundred years before. So why wouldn't the rabbis a couple hundred years later say things that he had said? Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Ah, yes. Right. It seems to fly in the face of the idea of open your house to many. Right. So, right. On the one hand, we could sense here a sense of lack of chesed here, and we saw that last week also about friends. But again, there's similar statements among the rabbis. They realize that you can't overdo it. You can't always have your house completely open. So, but yes, maybe there is something wrong with that statement. Moving along, rather, perhaps the book poses a difficulty because it's written: a sparse bearded man is clever, thick bearded man is a fool. One who blows up his cup is not thirsty. Well, one who said, "With what will I eat bread?" Take the bread from him. If he says, "Hey, really good chumus," you should be happy you have bread. I'll take away the bread from you. You don't appreciate your bread. One who has a passage on his beard, the entire world is unable to overcome him. I suggest, due to all this nonsense, it's not appropriate to read this book. So therefore, that's it. Now, Rav Yosef says, even though there are passages in the book that are inappropriate, we teach the superior matters that are in it, even in public. This is a very strong statement. We teach the things that are appropriate, and we could even teach it darshinalu. You would think darshina means you could make a drash out of it, but darshina sometimes means make a public proclamation about it. For instance, a good wife is a good gift. She will be given to the bosom of a God-fearing man. Ben Sira. We're going to see something very similar in Mishlei in just a moment. A bad wife is leprosy for her husband. All right, so yeah, so we'll see some similar things. He shall chase her from his house and will be healed from his leprosy. So they say you should try to get rid of her. So again, is that the type of thing we say? We're pro-divorce. I don't know, but the Talmud is saying it's okay. He shall a beautiful wife, happy as her husband. The number of days is doubled. Ben Sira 26. Due to his happiness, it's as though his life was twice as long. That's a modern interpretation. Good. Yes. Good. I like it. You also teach that it states there, avert your eyes from a woman of grace, a woman who has a charm, lest you be trapped by her snare. It's not just prostitutes that, as the Proverbs says, you stay away from prostitutes. It says also, women who are charming, turn not her husband to mix wine and strong drink with him, as many have been corrupted by the beautiful woman. You shouldn't even drink with her husband, because maybe you'll come to get too close to his wife. Mighty are her fatalities. Good. Ben Sira. Many of the wombs of the past. So anyway, yeah, he says later on, we're skipping a little bit from, she who lies in your bosom, guard the openings of your mouth. That's interesting. Strange. Right. Well, the ishto, I mean, they say it's even true of your wife. Right. Dr. Joe points out, the Mishnah says, don't talk too much to women, and they say that's true even of your wife. Certainly someone else's wife. Anyway, so they quote lots of good things. Okay, moving along. Now I would like to look. So that's interesting. When the Talmud says that they don't like it, what did they say? They said that some of the things about beards, etc., they're foolish, which means that it's not a holy book. It's not completely holy book. It has good advice, right? But they quote good things, and that seems to be the Talmud's view. Although Rabbi Akiva, generally we follow Rabbi Akiva, the Talmud over and again quotes Ben Sira. It's again, not so many times, but enough times, and they even sometimes say they quote it as if it's a verse, means that they seem to adopt Rav Yosef's position, which is, if it's a good thing, why not quote Ben Sira? As a matter of fact, Talmud quotes sayings that they say in Persia. So, but they sometimes wonder, where is that in the Torah? If it's a good saying in Persia, it must be in the Torah somewhere. So, and surely it's true. Good. Moving along. Here's our job for tonight. What time is it? 10 hours. Here's our job for tonight. Talking about family. And we know that we have certain idealized, perhaps westernized, perhaps Jewish ideas of what family is, and marriage, and that marriage is about love and commitment and all that. However, when you look at Ben Sira, when you look at Mishlei, it seems very transactional. It seems that if you look at the Eshet Chayil, she's a really good homemaker. So, so that's why she's a great woman of power. Is that what marriage is all about? So let's look at Rabbi Soloveitchik's idea of what marriage is all about. And there's just a little clip from him. He has a whole book about it called Family Redeemed. But, and then let's put the Mishlei and the Ben Sira to the test of Rabbi Soloveitchik. And then let's see how he comes out. And then let's go back to Chumash, as we did last week, and say, what are the Pentateuch, what are the 5 books Moses have to say about marriage? And maybe that we can get, that'll be the ultimate arbiter. Okay, so Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik, a pre-Orthodox thinker, 20th century. He wrote in a book that came out posthumously called Family Redeemed. There are 2 models for marriage in the Torah and the relationship of man and his wife. One is found in the first chapter of Genesis. There the Torah speaks of a human being created male and female. The relationship is in order to proliferate the species, little more, but also to conquer the world. And chapter 2, Torah presents the whole side of marriage relationships, the other side. When it speaks of Adam and his wife and his woman or his wife, it speaks of a man leaving his parents to cling to his wife, to become as one. More romantic, it's more existential. It speaks of a relationship whose purpose is to ground the individual with his soulmate, a helper, and someone to stand against him in his loneliness in the world. He's lonely. He's looking for animals. He can't find anybody to be friends with. So God makes him a woman. He's longing. He's lonely. First man is not lonely. He's made with woman. He's happy. The second one is lonely. He's longing. There's a relationship. It's more or less a little more romantic. So it's Garden of Eden. So these are the 2 models. The question is, look at Ben Sira on family. When we look at Mishlei on family, will it be more of this kind of deep soulmate type of relationship, or is it more perfunctory and more more pragmatic and practical to have a relationship between a man and a wife. Rabbi Soloveitchik also says there's six features of covenantal marriage. Covenantal meaning it's a real covenant, a real bond, a real tight covenant between a husband and wife. Covenants, a brit is a good model for marriage. We don't say brit. There are modern Jews who don't want to use marriage anymore. They want to use brit. It's true, marriage is a brit, but I wouldn't want to get into a brit because a brit is, you can't break a brit. That's what Catholics do. They get married, they make vows. You don't make vow. Well, why would you make a vow? Do what you do. Be a decent husband. Why would you want to make a vow about it that you never? What do you mean? You get divorced. So then, why are you vowing not to get divorced if there's a possibility of divorce? But there is. We'll see later that there are verses that say that marriage is a covenant. In any event, okay, come on in. So Rabbi Soloveitchik claims that the hi, Michael. So we're looking at the ideal of marriage in Rabbi Soloveitchik, and then we want to put Mishlei through the prism of Rabbi Soloveitchik. Now it's true, Rabbi Soloveitchik gets his ideas from the Torah, not the other way around. But I'm doing it this way to see if the Proverbs, in its view of marriage, lives up to the ideals of Rabbi Soloveitchik. So it's a sacrificial community. Is the idea that the wife and perhaps the husband too have to make sacrifices for the other. Do we see that in these books? It's a hedonic community, something we would enjoy. There's a physical part of marriage. The husband and wife enjoy together. That's part of what makes it go around, makes it, when people get into conflict, they can enjoy physically together. And that makes the world go around, it makes people happy. Procreative community, it has a purpose. It's there to have children. It's not the only, as it's only one of 6 reasons, but it's one of the reasons that one of the elements of marriage. Now on page 29. And it's a cooperative community. I help you, you help me. It's an affectionate and appreciative community where people express their affection for each other, and it's an educational community. When we establish a home, the idea is to educate each other and others with our home. Have your home wide open to scholars. So you want to have your home open to the poor, but also to the scholars. So your home can be a place of learning, and that's learning is not just something you do out there in the basement. The home is a place of learning. Teach them diligently to your children. Obviously, that's what it's about. Okay. So if marriage is all about all these things, what about the book of Proverbs? What about the book of Ben Sira? What do they say about these things? So let's take, I can't tell you if I brought every single verse from both of these sources to talk about marriage, but we'll bring a whole bunch. Let's take a look. I used Rabbi Hirsch, his anthology, the Baklaria is like an encyclopedia. He has certain verses that he brings about family. So let's take a look. Here's a beautiful verse. Matzah isha matzah tov, v'yafek ratzon me'Hashem. He who finds a wife has found happiness and has won the favor of the Lord. Hashem. This sounds very Western, right? That marriage is about happiness. It's not just a functional thing. Of course, you could say, no, it's just the man should be happy. He serves him to make him happy. It just, but you could object it from a feminist point of view, certainly, but pretty cool. The Ibn Ezra. Now let's see, how does some of the medieval rabbis look at these things? Now again, when we look at medieval rabbis, we always have to wonder: are we looking at the medieval? Who has the true view? Is Ben Sira influenced too much by the Greeks? Is Rabbi Soloveitchik influenced too much by Aristotle and modern philosophy and modernism? Are we too much influenced by that? Who has the true view? So that's one of our challenges. In any event, what Ibn Ezra, he says, he says, we go back to Genesis. If you found a woman and she is your helper across from you, as it says in Genesis, and he finds her, then he will find goodness. What does that mean? God will give him goodness. God will give him other good things. Not that the woman is the good. God will give him other good things if he finds a good woman. Why? If you found your right woman, you're bashert. God will reward you for it. Why? He's clinging to the one that God told him to cling to. You clung to the one that God told you to cling to, you will get good things. God will say, oh, I'm so happy. He's clinging to the one that I want. Now, how do we know? one, maybe supposed to be somebody else. Anyway, we always have to assume that, whoever, we're a little prophetic when we date, we're prophetic that this is the one. Some people don't find theirs, and I recognize that not everyone finds one. I don't mean to be insensitive. Those who haven't found their bashir. Good. So so here's also the idea of the matches made in heaven. Sounds very a little more romantic. It's not just functional. Okay, so that verse certainly, the Malbim. What does he say? Malbim was on 19th century. Is he influenced by modernism and romanticism? Well, he says, found someone who's good from his perspective. If it makes him happy and he likes her, and he gets he gets good from her. That's from Hashem. If man found a good wife and he's happy about it, that's a gift from God. A gift not everyone is able to get, but many people have this gift of a woman who is a gift from God. If you found a woman, he doesn't say you found a good woman. He's found a woman. You found goodness. Every woman can be good. You have to make her good. I heard on some African American radio. You got to make your man, so you got to make your woman too. Okay, Proverbs 19:14. You inherit stuff. Property and riches are bequeathed by fathers. Your father was rich, you have more money. You bequeath less, you have less. But an efficient wife, and some people make their own fortune, but an efficient wife comes from God. You don't inherit. Now he says efficient. I don't know which translation this is, I forget. But misakelas is someone who has seichel, a woman who's wise. Now, the translation itself, efficient, that reflects a practical reflection of marriage, right? She's a seichel-dik woman. What does it mean she's seichel-dik? When she goes to Kroger, she doesn't spend $500 for Shabbos. She only spends $200. She finds all the bargains. So, does that misakelas or no misakelas as seichel, meaning she's wise? Because if we could connect our first week where we talked about wisdom, which was the highest value in both of these books, that's the main topic of these books. They're wisdom literature. That's what these books are all about, wisdom, and Job as well, and Ecclesiastes, Kohelet too. So if the Proverbs say that a woman has seichel, then they're connecting it with the greatest essence of this book, the greatest teaching. So that's a pretty high endorsement. It's not thinking of some housewife who looks pretty and she makes good kugel. So it's talking about not talking about efficiency. It's talking about a woman with seichel. But again, what kind of seichel is it? Seichel for efficiency or seichel for business sense, or is it seichel for some kind of wisdom? We'll have to see. A graceful woman obtains honor. Perhaps honor to their husband. Good. So again, there's this idea that a good wife brings honor to the husband. Again, feminists would object. As a woman is only there to bring honor to her husband. In any event, let's continue. Proverbs 5. Let your fountain refers to the woman as fountain, your source, your root. Makor is your source, your roots. So that's interesting. It may harp on the Genesis idea that the woman comes from you. And the rabbis call Makor, the private part of a woman is called Makor. It may have to do with this verse. Usmach me'eshet nurecha, you should rejoice with the woman of your youth. So if you're lucky, you're married when you're young, so then you can say that your wife is the wife of your youth. And there's something special about that, because when you're young, you're very passionate and all that, So it's something from a long time ago. Try to make a friend when you get older, deep friendships. When you get older, it's harder. It's a friend from a long time ago. So Eshet Nu Recha. So there's perhaps an allusion to friendship there when you talk about what's the big deal about that you know her from youth. It's a deeper relationship. This can be taken very physically or not. A loving doe, a graceful mountain goat, let her breast satisfy you at all time. Be infatuated with love of her always. Now, could be a physical reflection and saying, look, one thing that's beautiful and special about women for men, heterosexual men, is a woman's breasts. And if he enjoys that, that's very good. So it might be telling us something that maybe we wouldn't talk about that in a regular pulpit, but Proverbs didn't mind talking about. Could be, or no. That breasts are a metaphor for giving and things like that. That woman is giving. You should enjoy her giving at all times. Maybe you should embrace. Be infatuated with love of get. I mean, same expression. You would think it would say the love of Torah, you should always be infatuated, but here's the love of your wife should always be infatuated. So this is certainly not simply utilitarian marriage. This is a little deeper. So don't get infatuated with other strange women. Don't hug, embrace the bosom of a stranger. That could indicate that the first verse was also about hugging. Moving along, 12:4. Eshet Chayil, which we'll get to later, the woman of valor. She is the adornment, the crown of her husband. So what does that mean? He says, so the Ralbag, I found the Ralbag, who was a Provençal 13th, 14th century philosopher. He's kind of, he gets into the more esoteric relationship with the woman kind of thing. This hints to a woman who's an adornment of her husband. We said earlier in Proverbs that wisdom is an adornment of your head. So apparently the wife can be an adornment of your head also because she serves the seichel. She serves good sense. When she prepares for him that which he needs. So again, that seems very functional. When she prepares all the suppers that he needs and business, and she pays the bills that he needs, there's that. But there's also she serves wisdom. So I'm not sure exactly how to translate it to medieval Hebrew, but in any event, maybe there's something loftier about how she serves wisdom. I'm not sure. Here's a statement about wisdom. 14:1. Proverbs. He says the wisest of women. It could be the wisdom of women builds her house, but a folly tears it down. So folly will destroy the house, but the wisdom of women will build a home. So yes, a woman as homemaker, but it also speaks of the wisdom of women. So yes, wisdom can be used for practical matters, but there's an element here of a wise woman. So, in fact, modern, religious biblical scholars have talked about the Isha Chachama, modern scholarship as well. There's an image of the Isha Chachama. One might say that she's exception to the rule, but there is kind of a wise woman. Certainly, Abigail is an example. Naomi, perhaps. Who else? Wise women in the Torah. Wise women. The good. Esther's excellent. There's also there are women who are referred to as a wise woman. There was a woman who told Yoav not to kill everybody. She would hand over one guy. There was a woman who came to David to talk to him about a problem with Absalom and all that. So there are and more pious than wise, but she knew what she was doing. Yeah, no question about it. So there is an image of the wise woman, and here it's alluded to as well. Yes, right. It was ruthless and wise. I mean, Ramban says that Sarah was too ruthless, but sometimes you have to be ruthless in raising your children. There's associated with this one, not that one. Period. Yes, I want to get back to Rebecca. I'll get to Rebecca at the end because I do think Rebecca is a wonderful model for marriage. We'll get back to it in a minute. Okay, the Eshet Chayil. We can't talk about family without talking about Eshet Chayil. It's strange that if you look at the introduction to that chapter, this is like verse 7 or 8 or 9 or 10. At the beginning of the chapter, it says it's from some king. The rabbi said that king is Solomon, but in the simple text, it sounds like this is borrowed wisdom from some other king. So apropos to our whole topic here, And we don't care who says these things. If there was once a king who said the Eshet Chayil, and it was nice, we put it in our Proverbs, and it's good. And it says so right there. But the rabbis, of course, say, no, it's not. It's King Solomon. It just calls him by some other weird name. Okay, moving along. So let's look at Eshet Chayil. Her value is greater than pearls. It sounds like it's functional. Batach le bala. The husband can trust in her. Now, does that mean that when he comes home at 6 o'clock and he has to go to his class at 6:45, he knows dinner will be on the table, right? Or is it a functional question? Or no, he trusts her. Trust is an ethereal kind of thing. He trusts her. He knows she's not sleeping around. He knows that she'll always be his friend. So which one is it? So the Ralbag says, he trusts her that he'll get her what he needs. Yeah, so that sounds more practical. The Malbim says most women, many women, will spend the wealth of their husband, and he doesn't know if she'll preserve his wealth, but he can trust her that he's not going to lose all his money. Okay, moving along. So again, that's practical. So, but I think one can suggest that this may reflect more of 19th century thinking than it does of the Proverbs itself. Perhaps the Proverbs are suggesting that there's an element of trust in a wife, which is a trusting community, as Rabbi Salvation might say. Moving along, she gives him good and not bad all the days of his life. Sounds somewhat functional, although goodness could be otherwise. She gives to the poor. So here we say that's functional. She gives her hands to the poor. So here we're saying that she has certain qualities. There's the quality of kindness. So the rabbis almost are saying that, look, you make the money, let her give it out. That's her job. And that's why she's the righteous one. She gives out the money. So we see something here. Also, she has splendor as her garb. And is that just so he should have a beautiful, splendid woman? Or are we talking about an internal quality? She laughs looking at the future. Is there an element of humor here? An element of good cheer that she has? What does it mean, good splendor, Ralbag? Her garment is strength and splendor. What does it mean? That she has complete and wonderful character traits, strength, beauty. She's able to overcome her physical needs, her physical desires, and she'll be able to. So it's claiming that she has certain spiritual characteristics. All right, now very clear statement. Her mouth opens with wisdom. Right? If wisdom is the main topic of this book, and her mouth opens with wisdom, then the woman is the source of wisdom. Again, some people think this is so beautiful and so metaphorical that they don't even think it's talking about a woman. They think it's talking about the Jewish people or God or. But yes. Right. Yes. Right. I believe that if you look at the Midrashim, I can't answer I believe that if you look at the Midrashim, they're absolutely right. The Midrashim take Eshet Chayil, talking about Sarah, to be talking about another woman of valor in the Torah, or to be talking about God and things like that. But they're talking about God and the Jewish people and all that. But the simple commentators, the Ibn Ezra and those people, they take it as it's talking about a plain woman. Yes. Eshet Chayil, very good. Ruth is described as Eshet Chayil, and clearly her main characteristic is kindness. So yeah, good. And also we have right here wisdom and kindness together. The Torah of kindness is on her tongue. So Rabbi Soloveitchik develops this in an essay about eulogy for a woman. He says, we're saying her mouth opens with wisdom. So is that the kind of wisdom that Aristotle had? Is that the wisdom of Proverbs? Is that the wisdom we talked about at the beginning of the book of having great wisdom in life? Or is it no Torah's chesed? Maybe the second half of the verse explains the first. Well, the kind of wisdom she has is the Torah of chesed that Rabbi Soloveitchik says you get from an old classic mother before women were so learned and all that. Like today, you get from your mother the the whole lesson of what chesed is all about. That's the Torah. But you could say it's two separate things. She has wisdom, she has chesed. Not clear. Moving along, Shadal, he was very modern. He was a professor, doctor in Italy. And he says, the teachings, he says, she teaches others to do chesed. She helps others do chesed with others. Her mouth opens with wisdom. What does that mean? All her words teach wisdom. What is wisdom? Wisdom is the knowledge of God. So he's claiming she doesn't teach wisdom like, in the university. Her wisdom is, as we say earlier in Proverbs, the beginning of wisdom is fear of God. So that's the kind of wisdom she would teach. And he says, it's also alluding to education, he says in Hebrew, education. He writes in Hebrew letters. It's also referring to education because even though he says, Talmud says that the man has to educate the children, he says it's still not forgotten here. The role of the woman to not only open her mouth just in general for wisdom, but clearly as a mother for her children to open with wisdom is alluded to here, that the woman plays a role in the education. Don't tell me it's just the man, as it would seem from the simple reading of the Mishnah of the Talmud. Okay. Ibn Kaspi was a very radical 13th century Provençal. He says she's not knowledgeable about science and things like that, or theology. She's knowledgeable about practical wisdom. So that, a good character. And he says, that's what I think. And he goes on a rampage against the art school. He didn't know art school, but he didn't like the Midrashim either about saying that this is alluding to something else. It's talking about women. Okay. Splendor, open her mouth open with wisdom. Good. Good. Let's and then of course the idea that beauty, grace is deceptive and beauty is illusory. Because we're going to get back to that in Ben Sira. Now, in our remaining few minutes, let's look at Ben Sira. We may have to go a little bit over some. So Ben Sira. Let's take a look. So first is a little bit about honoring parents. We have to skip that a little bit. Honoring parents. Good. That's always a good thing. Okay. Ben Sira 7. What page is that, please? Anybody? Thank you. Page 32, Ben Sira 7. He says, despise or reject not a wise wife. Now again, this wise is a practical, seichel is Torat Chaim Ivnim. Seeing she is well favored above rubies. We had that idea in Proverbs. Evil entreat not a servant that labors truly. Okay, 1 second. Then if you go down a little further, you should marry children off in their youth. Okay, Talmud mentioned that also. Good. Let's go to page 33. Ben Sira 9. Do not be jealous of the wife of your bosom, lest it teach or reveal a bad trait of yourself. So somehow you're not getting along so well with your wife. It's revelatory about you and your character. Don't be jealous of the wife of your soul. Ishan Avshecha. So he claims that it's a wife of your soul. I look in the Hebrew, Ishan Nafshecha. It might refer to you shouldn't be jealous with your heart. But if it means that you're the wife of your soul, that would be revelatory in terms of a deeper marriage. Then don't go to a strange woman, good. Don't look at the beauty of other women, good. That's Ben Sira 9. Ben Sira 26. Now, Ben Sira 26 is not found in the Hebrew. So we have to, we didn't find the whole thing in Hebrew. So it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but just footnote, it's not found in Hebrew. So listen to this. A good wife, blessed is her husband, and the number of his days is doubled. And we had that already in the Talmud. An excellent wife gladdens her husband. Good. It will make complete his years in peace. Good. A good wife, a good portion. Good. And she will be allotted to him, fears the Lord. The one who has a good wife, he fears the Lord. Whether rich or poor, his heart is glad. At all times, his face is cheerful. So again, the woman that plays this role. A wife's charm pleases her husband. Now we said that sheker achin, that charm is vain. So it's falsehood. It's a lie. Her prudence will fatten his bones. Okay. A silent wife is a gift from the Lord. Okay, now is this the type of cynical statement that our book of ours would say? I don't know. A silent wife is a gift from the Lord. Talking against women's chatter. Again, you'll find that theme among the rabbis that 10 measures of chatter came to the world, 9 were given to the women. So we find such a thing. So a silent wife is, oh, thank God she's not talking anymore. And priceless is a restrained voice. A modest wife, charm upon charm. That's great. And there's no price worthy of a self-controlled soul. The idea that she controls herself. As the sun rising in the heights of the Lord, so is a beautiful woman in the arrangement of her home. A beautiful woman. So again, is that statement in 16, is that a little bit too far? Is that a little bit too physical for us? That a beautiful woman is like a rising sun is a beautiful woman in the arrangement of her home. Is that, it's a nice statement about beauty of woman, or is that going too far? Is that kind of a PG-13 that we don't need in our tradition? I'll just raise that question. Let's continue. As the lamp burning of the holy lampstand, so is the beauty of the face of a stately figure. Are we going too far here? Why do we need this? Is this, most men don't need to be told that, okay? As golden pillars on a silver base, so are beautiful legs on firm heels. Huh? So here I want to mention the Talmudic story about Yeshu, the Talmudic Jesus, okay? Talmudic Jesus lived 200 years before the actual Jesus, but anyway, Rabbi Joel Finkelstein, right? So one of the early rabbis had a student, his name was Yeshu, and happens to be the same thing we call Jesus later on. And so he says, it's a beautiful motel here. We're staying in a nice house here. They're very hospitable. In Hebrew, it sounded like he praised the student. Yeshu thought he was praising the woman, that she was a beautiful woman, not the beautiful hotel. Because in those days, the inn and the innkeeper was the same thing. So the man said, the rabbi says, beautiful innkeeper over here. Beautiful inn. But he thought, he says, yeah, but she's a little bit, she has a funny nose or something. He said that, that she's not really that beautiful, says the student. So the rabbi said, what? You think that's what I'm talking about? I curse you and your children and your grandchildren. And he threw him out. The rabbi said, wait a second. Don't throw him out. There wouldn't be Christianity today if not for that. Anyway, is that the real Jesus? Not the real Jesus. Long century, but anyway, but there's an idea that maybe the rabbi yelled at him too much. He should have yelled at him and then bring him back the next day. But anyway, so this might be very Greek, that in other words, you praise women for their beauty, and we're going to have statues or pictures or paintings. So I wonder whether this text, which again, we don't have it in the Hebrew 26, whether this is an example of something we don't like. Ben Sira, he's just having vain physical discussions of a woman. Moving along. Ben Sira 25, we have it from the Hebrew. I do not. He said we have it in English here. With 3 things I'm delighted, for they are pleasing to the Lord: harmony among relatives, friendship among neighbors, and a wife and a husband living happily together. Let's take a look at the Hebrew. Let's see. He says, is that what it means? It means she supports. Maybe it's a more practical thing. She supports her husband. Is it happily together? Maybe that's a late translation. I'm not sure. Happy is a man who lives with a sensible woman, and the one who does not plow the ox of a donkey. Right. So a sensible woman, again, sensible woman may indicate a wise woman. Good. Moving along, verse 15, there's no poison worse than that of a serpent, no venom greater than that of a woman. So again, is that kind of a cynicism that doesn't belong in our tradition? I would rather live with a dragon or a lion than live with a wicked woman. Okay, it's a woman's wicked disposition changes her appearance and makes her face as dark as a bear. So, you marry her, she's not nice, but she's beautiful. If she's not nice, she won't be surprised. You can just close the door. You can just close the door. Yeah. So when her husband sits among his neighbors, a bitter sigh escapes his unawares. There's hardly an evil like a woman, and she full a lot of the sinners. So again, is this influenced by some culture that's not ours, which women are looked down upon? The woman's sin had a beginning, sin kind of an idea. Because of her, we will all die. again, is that the original sin? Again, we have that Eve was part of the original sin. There's no question about that. But because of her, we'll all die. Is this sort of like a Christian idea? Later on, did the Christians adopt this kind of idea? So there could be a lot of things in this chapter 26 which we don't approve of. No boldness of speech is to a wicked woman. If she does not go along as you direct, cut her off anyway. So is this some kind of nonsense that we is an example of what we don't like about this? Moving along. Wine and women will ruin your heart. Good. Good. Moving along. Bottom of page 35, Ben Sira 36. Any man will a woman accept, and a woman is more pleasant than another. So again, this kind of idea that maybe men have to be more picky. Men are more picky, women accept anybody. Beautiful woman brightens the countenance, excels every desire of the eye. You know that. And if she possesses soothing tongue, her husband is not like other men. Okay. It requires a wife gets the best possession. Possession, we have this idea of possession. A helper suiting him and a pillar of support. That's practical. Without a wife, a man is a wanderer and a fugitive. Okay, so that's more substantive. Somehow a woman grounds a man. That's interesting. Who will trust a troop of soldiers? So with the man who has no nest. You can't trust a man who has no nest. Settles. So the woman gives you a settled kind of feeling. It's interesting. That's more substantive. Good. And a wife and a husband who share each other's company. A very beautiful thing. A husband and wife who share company. It's good. Okay. Good. We're going to skip the part about sons. Okay. 42, page 37. Good. Then we have Ben Sira. There's a book on Ben Sira on family, gender, and sexuality. So it's actually a book, non-Jewish author, wrote a book about this topic of tonight's thing about family, gender, and sexuality. So he writes, Ben Sira's awareness of Hellenistic social mores is expressed in 31:12, where he deals with the appropriate conduct at banquets. Collins argues that Sirach's familiarity with and acceptance of Hellenistic banquets shows that he was no zealous opponent of Hellenistic culture as such. So he accepts some light forms of Hellenistic culture. He also knows Ben Sira attaches importance to honor and shame, which he argues are the core concerns of Hellenistic society. There's also lengthy discussion dedicated to matters of honor and shame, etc. So page 38, from the same source. Another question that arises in relation to Hellenism is whether the author was influenced by ideas of Greek philosophy, such as Stoicism. Again, scholarly opinion is divided among the matters. Some suggest the author had at least some knowledge of Stoic philosophy, and that his identification with wisdom and Torah is analogous to Stoic identification with universal law. Those who are not so familiar with Stoic ideas, aside from the idea that you should kind of be Stoic, you should be measured in your emotions, they had a general idea of developing sort of a good character. It's not something that we wouldn't necessarily disagree with. So in that sense, that part of it is similar. So the identification of wisdom and Torah is analogous to the Stoic identification of universal law. So, well, it's not the task of the present work to ascertain to what degree, if at all, Ben Sira was familiar with and influenced by Hellenistic philosophy. Some of his comments regarding the need to control one's passions, desires, resemblance to Stoic and Cynic philosophy. So there could be some touches of Stoicism, of cynicism, etc. On gender issues regarding Ben Sira's views of women, Warren Trencher's book is useful. He provides extensive comments, translation, blah, blah, blah. Trencher is correct in asserting Ben Sira has some of the most negative comments on women in contemporary Jewish and earlier biblical literature. So we noticed before, there's some really nasty things to say about women. But at times he fails to identify the positive comments, and despite his thorough textual analysis of the difference between Hebrew and Greek text, but he doesn't mention that our Talmud also has some negative things to say about women. So, good. So again, has he gone too far against women? Has he gone too far in talking about their physical body? There's a couple of footnotes for the, I think, the article edition of the Talmud, where in Sanhedrin 100b, in footnote 6 here, Ben Sira was a writer who flourished, and there's a Jewish tradition that he's he's a illegitimate son of Jeremiah, which interesting. That tradition kind of connects him with God. Right. It's the wrong center. Jeremiah is 6th century BC. He's 2nd century BC. But so it's unlikely, but it's interesting that they would even associate him with it. It's one of the books of Bhagavad. So he quotes an interesting thing here. He says, according to Rashi and others, Rabbi Yosef did not mean to equate Ben Sira with the books prescribed with Rabbi Akiva. Rather, Rabbi Yosef objects to the reading of Ben Sira only on the grounds that it contains worthless and vain notions, good disruption of Torah study. The Ritva permits looking into it occasionally. That's what we're doing tonight. This is occasional class of Ben Sira. We're not taking it too seriously. According to Yad Ramah, who's a Rishon, an early rabbi, and the Rif, early rabbi, however, 1,000 years ago, Rabbi Yosef is adding Ben Sira to the group of books prescribed by Rabbi Akiva. For although it does not contain outright heresy, it can cause people not to rely on God, ultimately lose their share in the world to come. So there are people who have a more negative view of this. Footnote 34, on the fact that he's quoted in the Talmud, right? We know Ben Sira is quoted in the Talmud. I showed you every week. Rifka concludes that the prohibition against reading Ben Sira applies only to studying it as if it were part of the Torah. We are not claiming in this class that we're studying Ben Sira on equal footing with Mishlei. But if we said that Ben Sira is a holy book because that's a nice idea, that would be heresy. No, we don't view that as part of our Tanakh. It's not a holy book. It's perfectly acceptable to pursue the book in order to acquaint oneself with its contents, which include much useful things that are useful. That's the Ritva on Bava Basra. The Bava accords to the first interpretation of Yosef, etc. However, according to the second interpretation, he forbids the reading the book of Ben Sira. So Yad Ramah, however, quotes a variant text in the Gemara, which removes the above difficulty. It says, if not the fact that the rabbis criticize it, you would be able to teach the good things. So, according to that, you're not allowed to read it. Obviously, modern, feminists will criticize these things. Lilith, a woman, writes in 2022, and that's where any narrative defines woman worth by the labor she performs for others. Right? So they're looking down at that. Of course, if it's mutual, it's okay, right? It's assumed it says next to everybody knows that the man has to work for his wife. Kyle is saying the woman works for her husband too. So he says, in Victorian literature and culture, there's an uncomfortable parallel between the Ishit Chayil and the conduct that guides where that were sold to women throughout the 18th, 19th century. In a nutshell, these were books taught women, the middle and upper class women. Their value as individuals were based on the ability to run a household and appease their husband. So, again, do we take this view, this sort of feminist view, and therefore we judge Mishlei through the prism of modern feminism, or do we look at Mishlei and say that's the Jewish value, or do we say that these are ancient works and that real Jewish values come from somewhere else? So I wanted to mention the theory I mentioned last week that real Jewish values come from real books of prophecy. Prophecy is higher than Mishlei. Malachi 2:14. So he says, what's the problem, God? So he says, what do you mean? He says, you were not faithful to your wife, meaning God, and she is your friend and the woman of your covenant. So here, if you want to know about real Jewish attitudes, here's a prophet, Malachi, and he says that your wife is described, or in this case, God, but your wife is described as your friend, which we didn't really find in any of these discussions tonight, and the wife of your covenant. That's how to think about it. It doesn't mean that we make a covenant when we get married, but it's like a covenant. Someone's a covenant. It's almost kind of in blood. It's permanent. It's forever. So that's what real marriage is. Ideal. What else? We look for other ideal marriage elements in the Torah, right? Abraham listens to Sarah. So what's her ideal marriage? Man listens to his wife when she has wisdom. She's the Eshes Chayil, says the Medrash, right? Says the art school. Sarah sacrifices herself to make him happy. You need a son? Take another wife. This is going to be the most miserable thing for me. And it was. But take another wife. Sacrifice. Right? Rivka doesn't want to hurt her husband. Right? That's sacrifice. Rabbi Soloveitchik said. It's a sacrificial community. Abraham gives up his son for Sarah. Sarah gives her husband a concubine so she can have children. It's a mutual sacrifice. It's a sacrificial community. Rivka doesn't want to hurt her husband. That's beautiful. Leah longs for Jacob, right? As in thinking about it, I couldn't find the ideal Jewish marriage. And we found ideal friendships last week. Ideal Jewish marriage, maybe you can tell me, but I don't think we find it so much. The Netziv was most famous for criticizing the marriage of Rivka and Yitzchak, that he was too much on a pedestal. They couldn't talk to each other. Okay, but you can also say, here's a marriage where they prayed across from each other. He had no other wife. He's worried about him. He's cursing. He's blessing the wrong child. He doesn't want to tell him directly. It says he loved her after they got married. It's just a lot of beautiful things there. And Leah definitely has a great longing for Jacob. In the end, it could be she caught him. At the end, they're buried together. We have the man clinging to his wife in Genesis. The man seeking his other half. He's lonely. We talked about David is impressed by Abigail's seichel. That's a marriage of two equals, right? Abigail is a woman of great seichel. Song of Songs speaks of romance and love, but that's not marriage. My daughter Rachel pointed out that Rashi, literature, Rashi, they're already married. The lovers in the book are already married. Doesn't seem that way. Isaac loved Rivka after they got married. The Ramban says, why does it mention that Isaac loved his wife? Everybody loves their wife. So he says he loved her because of her piety. That's considered kosher love. If your piety and her deeds, he loved it, and that was a great comfort to him after his mother died, who had great deeds as well. Radak says most women like their wives. Rather, the fact that it says that Yitzchak loves Rivka to show me that he had special love for all the wonderful qualities that she had. And then Rav Hirsch takes that view that they love to teach in yeshivas that love comes after marriage, that we don't marry for infatuation and physicality, but we marry of common goals. So I want to put a new twist on the practical marriage. When we say that the marriage is good, that the woman is wonderful because she takes care of her household very well, perhaps it goes related to this idea. Someone said that our marriages are too much like this: the man and the woman looking at each other, and then there's tension because like, what are you going to do for me? What are you going to do for me? And there's this tension. Jewish marriage perhaps looks more outward, and it says you got to do something. You have to build a house. You have to take care of the field. We have to take care of the children. We have to raise an educational community. We have to educate them in Torah. They're looking out, and there's less tension because they're looking out together as friends, looking out that they have a common shared goal. Maybe that's a way to look at it, with cutting through the feminist objection. We can cut through. But again, what's fascinating here is Rabbi Salvation expressing the true, deeper idea of marriage as found in Genesis. Is Rav Hirsch expressing the deeper meaning of marriage as discussed the love of Yitzchak, or is Mishlei? After all, it's a Jewish book and it's wisdom. That we want wisdom. You look at Mishlei. Is Ben Sira able to contribute to the conversation, or is he not kosher because he's a little bit too interested in beauty of women, and he's a little too negative on women? Influenced too much by the Greeks. So which one of us is not influenced by the Greeks? So, how do you get to the pure Judaism? I think I want to argue that Chumash, get back to Chumash, prophets. I think that you can tell the true ideology. Obviously, everything in Mishlei, as seen through the prism of the rabbis, is kosher. If they didn't think it was kosher, they reinterpreted it. So in the end, I think we found that there are some light motifs in the book of Ben Sira, which would perhaps make it frivolous, a little bit hateful, a little bit overly practical in its relationship to marriage. But that nonetheless has many beautiful sayings, many sayings very similar to other rabbinic sayings, many similar to Proverbs for sure. And it's certainly fascinating that in our generation we're able to actually read the original in Hebrew. We have the book more or less, and we went back to having this book that the rabbis mention, as the Ritva says, from time to time. So thank you for joining us. I don't have to run to the mincha, but it's great to be with everybody. And thank you for joining us for this series. And we'll continue in the fall, God willing. All right. Good night, everybody.